So as an example, if you look on the left-hand side of the task, allocated PY here for sole owners, 8.2 PY. So PY here stands for personnel years, which is a measure of the amount of hours associated with a given headcount at the board. So DCA uses 776 hours to equal one full-time individual. So that removes time for vacation, leave, etc. So that 8.2 is the total out of everyone that was associated with the study in the Contractor State License Board, all employees. We're saying 8.2 full-time staff equivalent were associated with working on initial contractors licenses. Next column over, equivalent annual hours, 14,563, again, for the sole owners. That's the same thing as the 8.2 PY. The next column over, FY 18-19 workload count. So for sole owners, that's 10,425 initial contractors license applications processed. And what we did in the column on the far right, estimated average processing time, is we simply just took that equivalent annual hours divided by the workload count to arrive at an estimated time there. So for sole owners, 1.4 hours. For the non-sole owner initial contractor's license, 1.9 hours. So the differences primarily in terms of additional processing time come down to the fact that there's more individuals associated with a non-sole owner license type compared to a sole owner license type. So specifically for that initial contractor's licenses, the staff is doing things like doing multiple background checks on individuals for the non-sole licenses, checking employee-specific bond requirements for multiple individuals, things of that nature. You go down to the next section there for the active timely renewal biannual contractors. You'll see that the sole owners take 2.8 minutes on average compared to the non-sole owners. That's 4.1 minutes. Again, for the similar reasons in terms of additional people needing to be verified. The last task there, enforcement actions. For this particular table, what we did is we consolidated all of the enforcement metrics, including accusations, investigations, complaints, etc., into an overall metric. And if you're looking here on the very right-hand side, you're able to see that on average, these enforcement actions in the aggregate for sole owners take 14.6 hours compared to non-sole owners at 29.5 hours, which is so almost actually slightly more than double the amount of time. And here it's related to contacting additional people for non-sole owner business entity types for interviews, communications with any type of enforcement issue. So there's a substantial amount of time difference, and that was kind of the foundation in terms of why you'll see later, we're recommending higher fees for that business entity type. Next slide, please. Great. So the next step in the fee costing methodology was we identified by each of those four primary budget categories that we talked about with the line graphs earlier, the amount of revenue needed to offset those expenses, as well as build a 4 to 5 month healthy reserve overall. And then once we identified that needed revenue, we took the time data from the work allocation study I was discussing, and then used that information to distribute the needed revenue for each of the fees. Then we took historical workload averages. So the workload output metrics I was talking about, initial contractors licenses, renewals, etc. And then we divided them by those metrics to arrive at an initial fee amount. So just as a really simple example, if there was a needed revenue for a fee type for, let's say, $100,000, and we had 1,000 application types, you would then end up with $100 as an initial fee, for instance. What we then did was we made slight adjustments where it was necessary in working with CSLB staff to make sure that the fee amounts were still even and fair to the licensee population based on industry best practices, and then with rounding as well. Next slide, please. Great, so here's a look at slide 1 of 2 of the recommended fee tables. What we did is we broke up the fee types into 3 different categories: new application, license maintenance, and then renewals. Renewals is on the next page. So just to kind of explain this table for a moment, the left-hand column is the specific fees, and then across the right-hand columns is different fee amounts, and I'll talk about each one of these individually. So the current regulatory fee is, if you are a contractor, what you would be paying to the board today. for any renewal, licensing fees, et cetera. That's current regulatory fee. Current statutory maximum is the ability that the CSLB would have today if they wanted to raise their fees through a regulatory process. We're pursuing with this fee study an increase in the overall legislative amount. So note that. Third column, revised regulatory fees. This is the fee amount that we would be recommending be instituted in statute with the result of this study. And then that last column over there, revised statutory maximum, is the ceiling we are recommended that CSLB be given to increase their fees through a regulatory process if needed to in the future, especially if expenditures are more than anticipated or revenues are less than anticipated. We wanted that 25% buffer in there to allow the board more flexibility in terms of raising fees on a quicker timetable if needed. So that's the rationale behind that 25% revised statutory maximum. A couple things I'll note here, and you'll see this theme basically on the renewals too, is that for the most part, we've kept the initial contractors related fees the same while increasing the non-sole owner fees. So if you take a look at the second row there, initial contractor's license fee for the sole owner, current regulatory fee reads 200, revised regulatory fee reads 200. So we're recommending that stay the same, particularly with the fact that their fees were just increased recently through that emergency regulation. Go down to the next line, initial contractor's license fee. Current regulatory fee is 200 right now. We're recommending that be raised to $350. So next slide. Great, renewal fees. Okay, so a lot of fees on this slide. Everything all here minus the bottom two rows has to do with sole and non-sole owner renewal type of fees. The bottom two rows are for the home improvement salespeople. So again, here, the non-sole owner fees have increased across the board compared to the sole owner fees have maintained the same amount with the exception of the 4-year timely and active. We recommended that for the sole owners, that increased from 225 to 300. Otherwise, it's the same fee level for the sole owners there. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is a high-level look at the total revenue currently received by each of these 3 categories, as well as the additional revenue projected, assuming the recommended fees are instituted. So on the left column there, we break it down by new applications, license maintenance, renewals. You look at, and this is an annualized figure here, revenue with current fees. So currently for new applications, the board's collecting $12.9 million. License maintenance is $1.2 million, and the biggest chunk is $55.2 million for renewals. So in total, $69.4 million. If you look at the last column here with the recommended fee levels, what that would result in on an annualized basis is 5.7 for new applications, 2.2 for license maintenance, and then renewals having the biggest increase there at 13.2 million. So on average, projected $21.2 million in additional revenue. And then the bottom section of this table looks at the bottom line impact of the months in reserves impact of that additional revenue. So looking at the bottom, we then look at by each fiscal year beginning in 21, 22, and this assumes, as I'll talk about a little bit in the next slide, fee increase as of July 2021. In FY 21, 22, without a fee increase, you'd have a negative 1.4 million months in reserve estimation, going all the way down to a negative 8.4 in 25, 26. Contrast that with if the new fees were recommended, the projections would indicate that in 21-22, the board would achieve a 2.8 months in reserves, and that months in reserve essentially gradually builds over time. So we were careful in identifying the recommended fee amounts that we didn't get the board too much revenue too soon, or the opposite. So these fee levels were designed to have a kind of a gradual buildup of the reserve without exceeding that 6 months that is in statute maximum. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this slide is kind of just a different way of displaying some of the revenue that I was talking about on the previous slide, and keeps the expenditure projections that we had originally had, with the exception of some adjustments that were made that Stacy highlighted just a moment ago. If you look at budgetary adjustments there, that 7.1 million in FY 2021 reduction in expenditures. So that information was incorporated in our final fee costing to arrive at the recommended fees, as was in FY 21-22, that 4.2 million reduction in expenditures having to do with employee salaries was also incorporated in this final analysis. And so then again, as you can see, the months in reserve there at the bottom line, same as the last chart, essentially, the board would see a gradual increase in their fund over time, all the way through 25-26. So, and that concludes the presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Hey, David, I can't hear you. You on mute?
You were right. Thank you. I want to thank Paula and Chris for that presentation. I asked if there was any board comment. And seeing none.
Wait. Oh,
Is there?
there we go. Yes.
Susan.
Chris, yes. Well, obviously, I always have questions. But Chris, can you elaborate on some anticipated and discussed revenue that was not included in your projection? I mean, it's sort of a good news, what we anticipated from the homeowner fees once implemented and some other things that you did mention in your report. It is not included in your forecast, but nevertheless, if implemented, those two items would substantially help the budget.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, we definitely talked about that report. I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but yeah, it was several millions of dollars that would, like you mentioned, be, as additional revenue to the board that wasn't included. And the distinction we made in terms of why we decided to include these reductions in expenditures like that 7.1 and that 4.2 million was because they were already, approved and codified. It was within the control of the board to make these estimations, whereas the revenue numbers are still projections that are a little bit less unknown. And so we decided to not include those. But yeah, if they come through, obviously the board would achieve a likely higher fund balance.
Great, thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, seeing none, I'll entertain the motion to approve the CPS fee audit study.
I so move.
Is
I
there a
second.
Or would you want me to read the staff recommendation to codify it?
Please do.
Yes.
So the motion is to increase the statutory minimum and maximum ranges for the fees in the CSLB's fee statute by approximately 25%, according to the schedule recommended by the fee study consultant.
So
I think that's what it is.
That's correct.
So you heard the motion. Is there's been a motion and a second. Any questions from the board? Any comment from public comment?
I have one more comment. And this is a question to Dave, really. Once this is approved, there are certain steps that we will need to take as a board to get this in place. Is it appropriate at this time for you to have Chief Jay describe that?
Yes, thank you, Susan. Mike Chemnetsky is prepared to kind of walk the board through the timeline and the possible legislative proposal. We were going to take that separate, though, from approving the board, the report itself. But if you'd like Mike to comment on it now, that would be fine.
I think it would be cleaner to pass the motion and then let's talk about it under ledge, because it's going to be a legislative deal we got to do, right?
It is, but the reason I bring it up is that implementing this, we can say, yes, we'll be on the right path, but it is by no means an easy path for us to take to get this in, to get this verified, to get it into regulation. So it is a part of the process, but I agree. Let's go ahead and vote on the motion, and then perhaps we can get a brief description of what the process is after this, because it's big.
Yeah, just to add to that, though, on page 171, it's immediately following the study itself. The thought was for Mike to again walk the board through the process, and also the ledge proposal would be something that he's prepared to discuss. After you vote on the motion that's on the floor.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other comments? With that, there's been a motion and it's been seconded. I asked for board comment. There was. Shelley, any public comment?
We do. We have a comment from Gilbert Collins. His comment is, would the board consider a 2% give or take stipend from both non-enforcement and external enforcement budgets that would also increase along with the 0.05% increase annually for grants to schools and local communities work development boards?
I think that's outside of the scope of the current motion.
Okay. And with that, we have no additional questions or comments.
Thank you, Shelley. Okay. Felice, roll call, please.
David Delatorre,
Aye.
Kevin Albanese,
Aye.
Frank Altamira,
Yes.
Augie Beltran,
Aye.
Ronnie Cobos,
Aye.
Miguel Galarza,
Aye.
Don Giordano,
Yes.
Susan Granzilla,
Aye.
Diana Love,
Aye.
Michael Mark,
Aye.
Marlo Richardson,
Aye.
Jimmy Wayne,
Aye.
Johnny Simpson,
Aye.
Nancy Springer,
Yes.
Mary Taggart.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, thank you, Felice. Okay, moving on. Page 171 is a legislative proposal to increase the statutory fee amounts as recommended in the CPS fee study. If approved, this will provide staff the authority to seek and author to raise the fees. Mike Chemensky, would you briefly walk us through the timeline should the board approve the legislative proposal today?
Sure. Thank you, Chair. Yes, on page 171 is the one-page proposal, and on page 172 is the statutory language that takes the consultant's chart, the recommended chart for recommended fee levels, which is on page 153. We're taking that chart and we're plugging it right into existing statutory language. And you can follow the chart really quite easily by taking a look at the red and blue statutory language on pages 172 and 173. But this is just to say that this proposal, if the board approves it, it will implement the recommended fee levels, and then it will be the CSLB legislative division's job to get this into a legislative measure. We're going to know soon here in a couple of weeks whether that will be in a policy bill, which is normally the kind of bills that CSLB advances after board approval, or if it will be in a budget trailer bill, which would be kind of a first for CSLB staff as far as a fee bill. We're going to work with the administration who's going to take the lead on that. Whether that decision is made. Basically, it's been a unique year because of COVID. So we're going to get a cue from leadership and DCA as to whether we're going to try to do this in a policy bill or a budget trailer bill. The difference in timeline, the policy bill, if we were to obtain an author at the end of this year in early January, it would go through both houses of the legislature and hopefully wind up before the governor in September. If it's signed, it would be effective in January 2022 and go into effect on our March 2022 renewals. So policy bill, March 2022 renewals. Budget trailer bill, a little bit different. The governor, as you all know, the governor must submit a balanced budget by January 10th. Throughout January and February, budget committee chairs in each house introduce the governor's proposal in bill form. The next few months, the budget committees get to work. legislature must pass the budget by June 15th, and the governor has 12 days to sign it. So if CSLB can get into a budget trailer bill in that period, we would be looking at summer effectiveness, and that would in theory be
Chief Jay,
September. Yes.
Can we just ask the moderator to mute everybody else's microphones, please? That would be very nice. Thank you.
I thought there was a
Hold on,
small
Mike.
child in my office.
Proceed, yeah.
And so if we get into a trailer bill, we're looking at approval by the end of summer with the governor's budget, by July 1st, and then September 2021 renewals. So that's the breakdown. Again, policy bill, January 2022 effective date for the March 2022 renewals. Trailer bill, July 2021 effective date, September 2021 renewals. And you will know when we know which mechanism we're going through. And then let me know if you have any questions.
Okay, thank you, Mike. As a reminder to the board, if you are not commenting, kindly place yourself on mute as to not disrupt the person making comments. With that, is there any discussion from the board? This is where you can unmute yourself. None? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve the legislative proposal to increase statutory fee amounts as presented by the CPS-HR and authorized staff to seek and author.
I'll make the motion to approve. This is Diana.
Is there a second?
I'll second. This is Mary.
So it's been moved and second. Any additional comments from the board? Shelley, any public comment?
Seeing none at this time.
Elise, roll call, please.
David Delatorre,
Aye.
Kevin Albanese,
Aye.
Frank Altamira,
Yes.
Augie Beltran,
Aye.
Rodney Cobos,
Aye.
Miguel Galarza,
Aye.
Don Giarratano,
Aye.
Susan Granzella,
Aye.
Diana Love,
Aye.
Michael Mark,
Aye.
Marla Richardson,
Aye.
Jimmy Wayne,
Aye.
Johnny Simpson,
Aye.
Nancy Springer, Nancy,
Yes. Sorry about that.
Mary Taggart,
Aye.
motion passes.
Thank you, Felice. So now moving on to agenda item D6 on page 179 is the administration update. I will now turn it over to Chief Administration Mike Meliza to provide an update.
Thank you, Chair Delatorre, and good morning, members of the board. The Administrative Division update begins on page 179 of your board pack, and I will begin with the Personnel Unit update. So I'll start with transactions. So during the first quarter of fiscal year 2021, that's July through September, CSLB personnel staff completed 145 personnel transactions. This included the addition of 4 new employees from other state agencies, 1 employee new to state service, and within CSLB, 119 employees were promoted and 17 transferred to different units. In addition, 4 employees accepted training and development assignments. The charts on page 179 show the total number of personnel transactions per quarter for this fiscal year in comparison to the previous fiscal year. So most of these transactions are a result of the transition to the Special Investigator series in our Enforcement Division. That's highlighted on page 180. So personnel unit staff worked diligently in July and August of 2020 to process the transitions of positions from the Enforcement Representative Series to the Special Investigator Series and Investigator Series. The more broadly known and used Special Investigator classifications has allowed CSLB to effectively compete with other state agencies for the most suitable and qualified candidates to fill our Enforcement Division vacancies. We'll go back to the top of page 180 and look at our vacancies. So during the first quarter of fiscal year 2021, CSLB averaged 48 vacancies. The personnel unit continuously works with CSLB hiring managers and the Department of Consumer Affairs to identify and minimize any delays in recruitment for these key positions. Go to page 1AT1. Your board packet reflects a list of examinations administered by DCA for the classifications we use here at CSLB. The majority of these exams are done online through the CalHR website. I'll now direct you to page 182 for the Business Services Unit update. I will begin with our facilities. One highlight is our Valencia office. CSLB, Department of Consumer Affairs, and Department of General Services identified a new location for our Valencia office. The CSLB approved the new location, the IT specifications, the modular furniture layout plan, and the floor plan, and construction in the new suite began June of 2020. Delivery and installation of modular furniture was installed in October of this year, and I'm pleased to report that we should be completing this project this month. We'll have our staff move over to the new building on December 18th. A list of contracts and procurements is listed on page 182. In light of the budget constraints, all purchases continue to be carefully assessed and only mission critical items are processed. However, we do deem personal protective equipment as mission critical items, and the following COVID related items have been purchased. In past reports, I've noted that we've always had masks. We purchased masks, gloves, and sanitizers. But in this report, we've purchased plexiglass sneeze guards that were installed on employees' cubicles at CSLB's headquarters to ensure proper social distancing. And then we also purchased freestanding hand sanitizer stations that were installed in high traffic areas here at the headquarters building as well. So that concludes my update for the administrative division. I'll gladly answer any questions you might have at this time.
Thank you for that update, Mike. Any board comments? Okay, seeing or hearing none. Is there any public comment?
None at this time.
Okay, so that was informational and no actions required from the board at this time. Moving on to agenda item D7 on page 187 is the information technology update. I will now turn it over to Chief of IT, Jason Perez, to provide an update. Jason.
Thank you, Board Chair, and good morning, everyone. On page 187 begins the information technology update. And I would like to highlight a couple of items, and the first one being the online renewal. The online renewal continues to its success, where CSLB is able to process approximately 4,500 transactions monthly. Additionally, the IT division is in the initial phase of evaluating the policy change to signature requirements for license renewal applications, specifically requiring only the qualifiers to sign the renewal application. The IT division reviewed our licensee data, and with additional modifications to our licensing application, CSLB will be able to completely process online renewals for partnerships, corporations, limited liability companies, and joint ventures when they only have one qualifier. During this initial data review, it appears we will be able to offer the online renewal process for up to 98% of our total licensing population. The IT division will plan this enhancement effort along with the currently planned IT projects scheduled for 2021. Continuing to page 190 to highlight the current and future projects. By the end of this month, IT division is planning to release online payment for citations. And then on January 1st, IT division will have completed the system coding to allow for retroactive online renewals. The scheduled 2021 projects are the online original application and the testing administration to our third-party vendor. And as I mentioned earlier, we also plan to add the single qualifier renewal enhancement to our 2021 modernization efforts. This concludes the information technology update. I'm available if the board has any questions.
Thank you for that update, Jason. Board members, any discussion, any comments? Okay, seeing or hearing none. Any public comment?
None at this time.
Okay, that was also informational and no action is required. Moving on to agenda item D8 on page 191. The strategic plan objectives. The objectives and status of each were covered in detail at the November 4th, 2020 committee meetings. There are no proposed changes to target dates at this time for the board to consider. The division chiefs are available should the board have any questions. Are there any questions from the board? Okay, seeing or hearing none. Shelley, any public comment?
Seeing none at this time.
Thank you. So we'll move on to agenda item E, enforcement. For that, we turn to our enforcement committee, Chair Kevin Albanese, and enforcement chief, Missy Vickery. The floor is yours, Kevin.
All right, thank you so much. And I had, give me 1 second here. Sorry about that, David. My thing got, there it is. All right. Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you, Chair De La Torre. The enforcement program update is going to begin on page 215 of your packet, and we start with a vacancy update and summary of the implementation of the expense reduction strategies. As reported in the board packet, 15 enforcement staff are currently redirected to assist counties with COVID-19 contact tracing. Last week, we were advised that the redirection of CSLB staff will likely continue until June of 2021. Taking into consideration the 24 enforcement vacancies, redirection of staff to contact tracing, and other staff on reduced schedule to assist with their children with distance learning, 45 enforcement positions are not available to assist with CSLB related work. Fortunately, and this goes back to the earlier part of the meeting with Amanda, and earlier as discussed in the budget, the special investigator classification conversion from enforcement rep has proved beneficial in recruitment efforts. It is now common to receive over 100 applications per special investigator vacancy. These applicants are highly qualified with extensive investigative experience. In the middle of page 215, you can see a status update of the expense reduction strategies that were approved at the June 5th, 2020 board meeting. This information is based upon billings between July 1st, 2020 and September 30th, 2020. AG expenses are currently averaging $598,000 per month, with the goal being to get that to $580,000. Arbitration billings are currently averaging $55,000 a month, with the goal being to $45,000. And additionally, the goal is to keep industry expert expenses at less than $50,000 a month, and currently those are averaging $20,000. Reducing costs by $7 million while still meeting enforcement expectations is a challenge, but staff have implemented several strategies to achieve these cost reductions and improve legal action effectiveness, including increasing the utilization of the letters of admonishment for less serious and standalone offenses that really do not include a financial injury. Issuing these LOAs allows CSLB to hold informal office conferences with licensees to address their appeal of the LOA, rather than incurring costs of the AG representation for a formal citation and possible appeal hearing before an administrative law judge. Additionally, enforcement staff was authorized at the June board meeting to refer consumers to small claims court and the licensed surety bond when the licensee does not have a history of repeated offenses and the estimated financial injury is less than $10,000. The process was implemented on August 1st, and as of that date, 125 complaints have been forwarded to the ADR process change. Enforcement staff continue to make every effort to settle or resolve licensee complaints before referring the matter to the small claims court and/or the bond. At the November 10th, 2020 meeting, November 10th, 2020 committee meeting, board member Nancy Springer requested an update regarding the complaint prioritization statistics. Consumer complaints were received, closed, and referred to field investigation in 2020. In September 2020 were reviewed. During this time, the intake and mediation centers in Sacramento and Norwalk received approximately 1,000 consumer filed complaints. The IMCs also closed 607 licensee complaints, with 166 of those complaints settled, resulting in over $2 million restitution awarded to financially injured persons. Following the analysis of 273 complaints referred for field investigation in September 2020, this confirmed that enforcement staff are appropriately using the prioritization guidelines as listed on page 217 to ensure consumer safety. The urgent priority includes elder abuse, grand theft, health and safety code violations, and diversion of funds. In the urgent priority complaints, there were 17 of them meeting those criteria, and they were referred to field investigation with possible egregious criminal violations and were assigned primarily to CSLB peace officers. Health and safety code violations are generally assigned to an investigation center special investigator that has developed a local relationship with the local building department. 26 of those complaints reviewed alleged high priority relating to fraud or misrepresentation, aiding and abetting, workers' compensation insurance violations, and repeat violators. Those were referred to investigation centers and typically assigned to more experienced special investigators. There were also 221 routine priority complaints that related to unlicensed activity, poor workmanship, abandonment, permit violations, and they were also referred to a field investigation. Finally, there were 9 low priority complaints that included standalone contract violation, advertising violations, failing to display license number, and those were referred for investigation. In keeping with CSLB's all hands on deck approach, some of those cases are being handled by executive office analytical staff. I also want to provide an update on the handling of permit-related complaints. Permit violations may fall within the urgent priority if there is a health and safety issue, or routine priority if there are less than serious violations. The permit violations that fall into the routine category are often handled by the issuance of a letter of admonishment accompanied by a corrective action plan that would also require the licensee to complete the online permit compliance training video and rectify the permit violation with the appropriate building department. Again, this would not preclude the complaint from being elevated to an urgent category that may result in a more formal disciplinary action if there were health and safety components. As previously mentioned, enforcement staff began using the permit violation training video in conjunction with a corrective action plan on July 1st to further educate the contractors of the importance of following permit requirements set forth in the local building departments. To date, we have issued 18 letters of admonishment that include the correction action plan to watch the permit video. Of those 18, 4 have complied, 10 are pending compliance, and 4 did not comply, and that case has been returned to the investigative center for issuance of a citation. There's one investigative highlight that I'd like to bring to your attention, which is on page 219. You can find the summary of CSLB's investigation into a licensee who was found to be renting out his license number to an unlicensed contractor for $1,250 and 30% of the project's profits. And the unlicensed contractor's project on a home in Oakland, California was halted when the city of Oakland's planning department noticed several permit violations. But this didn't happen until after the homeowner had already paid almost $35,000 towards the almost $62,000 contract. An accusation was filed against the licensee responsible for renting out his license, and his license was revoked on August 24th. Currently, there is an investigation underway against the unlicensed contractor for acting in the capacity of a contractor without a valid license. Before we move into the Solar Task Force update, I'd like you to note the general complaint handling statistics for your review, starting on page 220 and ending at page 223. All of these items are informational. I'd like to just take a quick break and see if there's any board comment or public comment, as no action is required of the board at this time.
I have a
Nancy?
comment. Sorry, I was trying to get the little hand to go up. I just wanted to say thank you to enforcement for reporting back so quickly on the results of the enforcement and the prioritizing the different enforcement features that we're doing here, and that it's still all working and that we're still out there. It's just always good to hear those numbers and know what's going on. I know it's difficult times, and it just shows, doing a good job. So, kudos to staff, and thank you for the information.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nancy. And yes, kudos to staff. I mean, against whether it's spending cuts, whether it's lack of personnel, I think they've really done a great job prioritizing the complaints and the issues and hitting the most serious ones. And I thank the board for the prioritization guidelines, because that's really helpful and allows for quick decision making. Any other comments or questions from any board members or public before I move on into solar? Seeing and hearing none. We're going to turn to
moderator. We do have one comment from the public.
Okay.
It is from Gilbert Collins, and he says, not to belabor the point, would the board consider a 2% give or take stipend from both non-enforcement and external enforcement budgets that would also increase along with the 0.05% increase annually for grants to schools and local community work development boards, or if nothing else, place it on the next agenda for discussion?
We could certainly ask the board chair to put that on the next agenda item for discussion. I don't think that's appropriate in the enforcement portion of this meeting.
Thank you. That's our only question or comment.
Wonderful. Then we're going to turn to page 227 of your packet. And this agenda item highlights the continued partnership between our board, the California Public Utilities Commission, and the Department of Financial Protection and Innovation, formerly known as the Department of Business Oversight, in combating fraud in the residential solar industry, and the details of the enforcement strategies employed by the CSLB for this unique industry. 5 years after the formation of the Solar Task Force in 2015, CSLB continues to receive a high number of solar-related complaints monthly. Between January 1st, 2020 and September 30th, we've received an average of 100 solar-related complaints per month, a 10% increase over the prior year. The next section of the solar update starts on page 230 and addresses the requirements of Business and Professions Code 7170 as listed on that page. A staff report to meet the requirements of the Business Professions Section 7170 revealed that between July 1, 2019 and June 30th, 2020, CSLB received 1,067 solar complaints. As of November 9th, 2020, 1,014 of those complaints had been sufficiently investigated to determine the nature of the complaint, and that breakdown can also be found on page 230. You turn to page 231, you'll find a breakdown of legal and non-legal dispositions from 791 investigations that were completed between July of 2019 and June of 2020. Per the requirements of the code, the information and the above specific zip code information will be posted on the CSLB and PUC websites. On December 7th, 2020, CSLB joined their partners from the PUC and DFPI in continued collaboration of strategies to educate consumers, enforcement of existing laws, and consider enhanced consumer restitution strategies. These discussions conducted at the meeting will require an enforcement committee meeting in February of 2021 to address 2 of the PUC's proposed decisions that will absolutely impact CSLB's enforcement operations. The first of PUC's decisions will require the investor-owned utilities to provide interconnection packets to CSLB for review of potential violations. Contractors must submit an interconnection packet that includes the customer contract to the utility whenever they're hooking up to the grid. As mentioned at the September board meeting, a pilot program in which CSLB staff reviewed 153 interconnection packets revealed that over 90% of those contracts submitted did not comply with contractors' law. These findings prompted the production of the industry bulletin found on page 228, which outlines the contractual requirements when entering a residential solar installation contract. These include that the solar energy system disclosure document must be included on the front page or cover page of the residential solar energy contract. A home improvement salesperson must register with CSLB in order to engage in the business of or act in the capacity of a home improvement salesperson for a contractor. The home improvement salesperson must be registered with the solar contractor or contractors they are selling for. The contract must also include the approximate date when work will begin and the estimated completion date. And except for the down payment, a contractor may not request or accept payment that exceeds the value of work already performed or materials already delivered. Further, the contract price and all subsequent progress payments must be stated in the contract in dollars and cents. The audit parameters and enforcement expectations and strategy need to be reviewed and discussed by the enforcement committee. While I understand the benefits of proactively reviewing interconnection packets, CSLB workload must be managed and those priority guidelines we talked about earlier need to be complied with. I look forward to staff's recommendation at the proposed February enforcement committee meeting. The second of PUC's decisions that will be discussed involve a possible residential recovery fund to address a unique degree of financial harm incurred by homeowners when they enter into residential solar contracts that provide for lender payments directly to the contractor and/or in advance of work performed. The PUC has proposed establishing a recovery fund to provide restitution when all other remedies have been exhausted. This can occur when a contractor is subject to license revocation, files for bankruptcy, or leaves a homeowner with no financial redress. The proposed fund would be administered by PUC and funded by a surcharge collected by the PUC when connecting to the grid. In February, the Enforcement Committee will be asked to consider the three following questions. If the Enforcement Committee recommends the full board support the proposed decisions, the requirement that the contractor involved in the complaint reimburse the recovery fund, and the fund's ability to move forward without a payout with an order by the registrar or designate versus waiting for a proposed decision from an ALJ. It is my understanding PUC commissioner and or staff will be present for both of the proposed decisions by the PUC. Again, informational item only. No action is required from the board, but we thought this was important to provide updates. Are there any public or board comments